I'm going to tell you a story of forbidden love that eventually turns into a ghost story that takes place in East Hill Cemetery, located in Bristol, Tennessee. Now, if you're wanting to know any of the history, I suggest that you go back to the video on my page before this one where we talk about the history and the prominent people and a few hauntings of this cemetery. So back in the early 1900s, there was a man named Milton Weber, and Milton Weber was known to be somewhat of a drifter. He had moved to Bristol from Arkansas at the age of 25, where he eventually found a boarding house to be a tenant in, and he got a job working at the Buffman Mills, where he eventually started making something out of himself and losing that drifter status. The boarding house that he was staying in was owned by a Mr. and Mrs. Haddon, and they had a daughter named Sally. Well, Sally was very easy on the eyes, and she was a hard worker with great manners. They said that she worked her hind end off cooking, cleaning, and serving the tenants. Well, she definitely caught on Milton's eyes. The problem was Sally was only 15. And it was no secret whatsoever that Mr. and Mrs. Haddon did not want Sally courting nobody that was a tenant in their boarding house, especially not somebody they didn't approve of. And apparently, Milton was a little frowned upon with his reputation of being a drifter in the past. But it didn't take long for Milton to work his charm on Sally and start meeting her in secret. And they'd have these deep conversations, and eventually they fell very, very deep in love. But just a few short weeks later, Milton asked for Sally to marry him in secret. Milton came up with this elaborate plan where he was going to get Sally to get off work as soon as it got dark and meet him at the First Baptist Church, where they would go hand in hand to get married by the Reverend that lived at 117 3rd Street. And this Reverend's name was A.H. Burroughs. And he looked at the two of them and said, "Okay, are y'all ready to get married?" They said, "Why, heck yeah, we are." He looked at the girl and said, "Are you old enough?" And she lied about her age and said, "Absolutely." Preacher nodded his head. They took their vows and they walked hand in hand back to their house on Upper William Street. See, that night Sally did not return back home. And Mr. Haddon? Whew, he was livid. He was looking for his daughter everywhere, but he could not find her. But y'all know how small towns are. Word starts traveling fast. So in the next few days, he heard rumor and tale that his daughter had run off and got married to Milton. And he sure the hell hadn't seen Milton in a while either. So it all made sense. He started searching around the town where eventually he learned that Milton had worked at Buffman Mills. And he went down there to inquire about it just to find out and be told that Milton didn't work there anymore, that he had quit over a week ago. Well, Mr. Haddon was so livid that he took a vow that very day. He said, "You know what? When I find the two of them, I'm going to take Milton out," if you know what I mean. But Mr. Haddon is right there. Soon found out that Milton did work at the McCrary Brothers Construction Company, and he started sitting up post, watching, trying to see if he could see him going to his job. After all that time of waiting to see Milton and Sally, he did not. So winter was setting in and he needed some wood for his cook stove. So he went up towards William Street to the intersection, and there was a hillside. Well, up on that hillside there were trees, and he started just cutting them down, getting him some wood for his fire. When all of a sudden he noticed a little cottage across the street. There was his daughter and Milton walking out of it. Filled with anger and rage, he threw his axe down and he ran down that hill and he took out his. And as soon as he took aim at Milton, Sally jumped in front. As it went through, it hit her right here. And she laid there, passing away in a home pool of blood. Well, Milton, he took 3 to the chest, and he passed away right there next to her. Mr. Haddon was quickly apprehended, and he lost his mind. They stuck him in the jail, and he started taking his head and putting it against the wall. He was trying to take himself out because everywhere he turned, he said that he saw Sally. The jailers grabbed him up and constricted him to where he could not put any more damage on himself. And oddly, he screamed all night long until about midnight, when all of a sudden he just fell over unalived. Milton was soon buried in the pauper section of the cemetery, and Sally was buried up upon a hill near Hugh Hagen Drive. And Mr. Haddon was not buried anywhere near either one of these individuals. Roughly around 9 o'clock one evening after the burial, a couple was sitting on their porch, not too far away from where Milton and Sally had lived, and they were facing the cemetery. Well, they could see a light appear at Milton's grave and one at Sally's. And the one from Milton's grave floated up to Sally's grave. And they got real bright and became one light and then disappeared. These lights have been witnessed so much that they began a name for themselves as the courting lights. And people that saw the light come out of Milton's grave said, you know what? I see old Milton's headed to go visit Miss Sally this evening. An officer a few years back saw the lights in the cemetery that caught his eye on the end of his shift. And he thought somebody done broke into the cemetery and was doing stuff they weren't supposed to be doing, like vandalizing and such, which is frowned upon. So he went up there to see what was going on and to get these people out of the graveyard. And when he looked, he watched that bouncing ball of light go all the way up the hill to Miss Sally's grave, become one, flash big, and disappear. It's said that even after death, these two are still together. If you like this story, you know what to do. And if you want to hear more like this, let me know as well. Have you seen the courting lights of the East Hill Cemetery in Bristol, Tennessee? I'd love to know it and hear about your own experience. Y'all, don't forget to follow me for more paranormal stories.